This is Aaron Golub, host of the Blind Ambition podcast. We'll be bringing you world-class leaders, entrepreneurs, and athletes, people who have overcome obstacles and used their ambition to create enormous success in their lives. If you enjoy this podcast, if you get anything out of it, the only thing I'll ever ask is that you subscribe, rate, and review. Hope you enjoy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in. I'm Aaron Golub, as you know, and today I'm joined by Matt Newman. Matt, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it's an absolute honor. Thank you for taking some time and having me today.
Yeah, no, of course. So first off, you've had a really interesting journey. You know, your career in the financial world, your battles with cancer, your just becoming a speaker. You know, what drove you to kind of go into the career path you're doing today? You know, did you always want to go into the field that you're in, or when did you really have that interest growing up, or was it past college? What kind of sparked that?
It's a great question. And what's interesting is we get a lot of lessons that are actually dropped into us at young ages that don't blossom and make sense till older. We're given these thought processes from our parents, from loved ones, that we think like, why are you telling me this? What do I care about that? But what they're doing is they're instilling in something inside of us that will later come to fruition. So my father actually worked with my grandfather in New York City. And it's ironic that we're talking about that today, especially with our, on the 19th anniversary of 9/11, which my thoughts, prayers, and love goes out to everybody who had any affiliation with that. And we still will have the utmost respect and love for all those first responders and the things they did. And I grew up right outside New York City. My father worked in New York City, my grandfather in New York City, my dad's from the Bronx. My heart is with every one of them today. And it's tough sometimes to think about other things on this day other than appreciating life as things are so fragile. And which is one of the reasons I think we're having this conversation today, because I talk a lot about that. But my father worked in the food store business. That's what my grandfather did since he was, no joke, 8 years old. And my father owned food stores, and he never really saw his kids. We lived in a town called Parsippany, New Jersey, which is, call it 25 minutes from the city. There's no way that's going to take you 25 minutes. When you're going to the city, that's a solid hour and a half on a good day. And when we were younger, we never saw my dad. He was leaving at 5 a.m. He was home at 10 o'clock at night. So he went into the financial services arena. And I had these lessons instilled in me at a young age about planning. People want what they can't get. People want life insurance when they can't get it, long-term care when they can't get it. They want some type of financial plan when they lose 30%. It's about having a plan in place prior to the negative to give people independence and dignity at these difficult times. It made no sense to me growing up. But I remember graduating from the University of Delaware in 1996. Maya Angelou gave this beautiful commencement speech on our football field. And I remember my father coming up to me after going, "Not bad, buddy, right?" I'm like, "Dad, king has arrived, man, college graduate, right?" He said, "What do you think you want to do now?" I go, "Dad, that's easy. I want to become a financial advisor. I want to join your firm. That's something I want to do." And in my father's thick Bronx accent, he said, "There's no bleeping way I'm letting you join my firm." And every picture of me has this frown on my face, this look of anger at graduation, because I was like, what a jerk. What he was giving me is one of the greatest lessons in life, that there's no free lunches. If you want to make this, if you want to make it your own, if you want to make it a craft, if you want to make it a passion, go out and do it, learn it, and then come back and talk to me. So I had all these little things instilled at me at a younger age that made no sense about planning, preparation, all these things about finance. And that's what I really wanted to do. And what I started to have a better understanding of was how wrong the U.S. education system actually is. Because we get people in this position to go into the real world. They graduate high school, maybe they start their careers. Maybe they go to college, then they start them. Maybe they go to medical school, law school, grad school, whatever it's going to be. And we siphon them with this level of intelligence to go out and to start their life. But we teach them absolutely nothing about the basics of financial planning. And let me make this clear. The biggest misnomer in the world is that the term financial planning relates to investments. That's probably the smallest component of it. Financial planning is legal documentation. It's your will. It's, God forbid, you become incapacitated, your power of attorney. It's having your life insurance trust in place. It's not about the amount of money you have. It's about being instructed to check the right boxes as you start your career. So if, God forbid, the unexpected happens, it's one less thing of regret and resentment that's on your shoulders. I was fortunate. I learned all this and it became my craft. So I started in financial services in 1997 and I just found something I absolutely loved.
Yeah, that's so important. And, those are really one thing I like to talk about a lot is about the 3 P's of success, in my opinion. And I break those down into planning, passion, and perseverance. I think those are crucial to being successful and being fulfilled in whatever field or goal that you have. And, I see that in kind of what you're talking about as well, creating a plan, which is important for not only in the financial industry, but in everything in life. If you want to achieve something, you need to create a plan for success. If you're passionate about something, you're going to be much more likely to follow through, to work harder, to achieve that goal, and then persevere through all the challenges. And I think that so many people are missing in at least one of those 3 areas. And they wonder why they're not accomplishing their goals, or they wonder why they're not happy on a daily basis. They're not excited to get out of bed. And there's an area missing. And that's kind of how I like to break it down.
I agree with you, but I also think there's this Teflon feel that we have. We're indestructible. I've heard this happen to friends. I've heard it happen, but it can't happen to me. That can't possibly happen. And what happens is we learn the greatest lessons in life at the deepest and darkest of times. When we're given this new lens to look through and this new perspective on life, we're given this better understanding of how fragile things can really be. And that's why we often want what we can't get. A perfect analogy for a former football player is no one has fun during the week leading up to the game because all you're doing is practicing executing the game plan. The game's the fun part, but all that is work to have a plan in place leading up. Nobody's winging it. And I could use that analogy in a variety of different fashions, but when do most people want life insurance? When something hits them in the heart and they realize, oh no, my family's not taken care of. Then it builds regret, it builds resentment, it builds negativity. And the odds of you being able to take on that new battle at hand when you have all this on your shoulders makes it much more difficult. If you can check the box, which is not how much money you have. It's not about the investment you make. You can go on LegalZoom for some of this stuff and do it for $19, but it's having something in place that lets you take on the journey that you've been placed on and fight with everything you have inside of you because you don't have this I would have, could have, should have in the back of your mind.
Yeah, definitely. And so talk a little bit about your journey. I know, you've had a battle of cancer and with brain cancer for a long time, but where did that start? Was it kind of around the time that I know you got in a car accident and then you started to have, these throbbing headaches? Is that when you kind of noticed that something was wrong?
Yeah. So what happened is in 2010, my father-in-law, Larry, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was 60 years old. My first experience with cancer happened when my Grandma Harriet, was diagnosed. I was 15 years old, and I wasn't old enough to understand it or get it or really see the magnitude of what was happening. But I remember one day she was Grandma Harriet, the next day she was wearing a cancer turban, and the next day she was gone. What I really remember was the devastation of what it did to my mother. My mom would talk to my grandmother every single day. Every weekend we were at their house in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. They were at our house in Parsippany, New Jersey. And I saw my mom cry nonstop. I saw her become a different person. And I built up this hate and this anger for cancer. I wish I could have been there for. I wish I would have hugged her more. I just didn't get it. I was too young. And it built this perception to me that this is this evil thing. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about your family. It does what it wants when it wants.
Yeah.
My wife and my father-in-law were very similar. I'm a Jewish guy. I grew up in northern Jersey. Dad was a financial advisor. Mom was a teacher. My wife grew up in a very different environment. My wife was a Catholic girl who grew up in mining country, Pennsylvania. They grew up in a 400 square foot row home. My father-in-law was a highway construction worker. My mother-in-law was a janitor. It was two completely different lifestyles, but she was exactly the same with her dad as my mom was with her mom. My father-in-law gets diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She's pregnant with our third child. We got 2 kids under 3 years old. And every day she would drive him 45 minutes to the University of Pennsylvania. She would take him down there to get his Whipple procedure. He went through all that. that every day back and forth for chemo and radiation, she never bitched. She never complained. What I saw was an honor to be a part of. It was inspirational. That's what family does. Something needed to get done. She took care of the kids, took care of me, pregnant, and would drive her dad back and forth and be there for him. It was a gift that I was being able to watch what real love is all about. And I remember sitting down with my father-in-law. And the reality is, you go through pancreatic cancer, you got about a 6-month shelf life. And I remember him telling me that he had 2 goals. The first was he wanted to see all 3 of his grandkids born. The second was he wanted them all to be old enough to have real memories of him. He was a warrior. And it was amazing to be around the 2 of them. And I saw things different that I wish I could have been there for my mom that way. But when you're a young kid, you can't understand that. So as he's going through his cancer, and it's like a roller coaster up and down, and he's putting that fight on, and he's doing it with independence. He's doing it with dignity. He's fighting. And we get 2.5 years into it, and I got into a car accident, like you mentioned. And I got into this car accident, and I pull up to a traffic light. My car hydroplanes into the car in front of it. It's a snowy, icy, miserable day in Bridgewater, New Jersey. My car flips over, goes into the median, and I'm holding onto that steering wheel. The airbag pops, and I'm thinking, with everything in me, this is why I do all this training and working out. And I got out of the car without a scratch on my body. And the police come running over me like, dude, you got to go to the hospital, man. I was like, no, man, beast mode. No, I'm cool. I'm good. They go, you got to get to the hospital. So I called my wife up, who's down with my father-in-law for chemotherapy as his roller coaster is going in different directions. And I tell her what happened. She goes, you got to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm okay. And she reminded me about her friend Karen Mancini. Karen was in a town called Bluebell, Pennsylvania. And she's at a traffic light. And a car comes flying through and T-bones her at a red light. And the police say to her, you should go to the hospital. We want to make sure you're okay. 3 hours later, the doctors walk in and go, I want you to send flowers and a thank you note to the person that hit you. You would have been dead in the next 4 to 5 hours. We found a brain aneurysm inside of you. It had nothing to do with the accident.
Yeah.
I thought about my kids. I thought about my wife. And like a type A personality, I went on my way. That night I got home, and the pain, like you mentioned, was massively severe. I've never really had a headache before. And my wife suffers from chronic migraines. I got my father-in-law sitting on the couch going through chemotherapy. My wife's in the kitchen. I'm complaining about my head. She's like, did you go to the doctor? I'm like, no. She goes, I don't want to hear about it. Try getting chronic migraines.
Yeah.
Over the next 2 weeks, it just got worse and worse every day. But it wasn't about me. It was about the children. It was about my father-in-law. It was about my family. 2.5 weeks into it, I lost all ability to sleep. The pain was so severe, I'd pass out on the couch watching baseball with Larry at 8:30. I'd wake up at 10, and I couldn't go back to bed. And I started to have what I thought were strokes. I basically speak professionally. I speak all over the place. And I'd be giving a speech, and I'll never forget, I felt a hot flash hit me in the face, like a pregnant woman would get. And when that hot flash hit me, all of a sudden slur and gurgle just poured out of my mouth. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was going on. And I remember seeing myself standing outside my body going, you're having a stroke. You are having a stroke. I got myself together. It felt like an eternity. It was really about 5 to 6 seconds. I'm like, oh, kids have sinus infections. I'm not feeling too good. Let's bounce back into this presentation. I don't think most people caught on to it, but I was scared out of my mind. And over the next, call it 3 weeks, I had 9 more of these. I had one when I was training for the Broad Street Run in Philly, the largest 10-mile run in the country. I had one when I was driving, a couple more when I was speaking. And you started to think like, okay, there's a problem now. And I was in my hometown of Parsippany, New Jersey, giving a speech in front of about 300 people on the need to prepare in advance of the bad. What I spoke about all the time in financial planning was the job of the financial advisor is to be there when things are bad, to give people good news at the deepest and darkest of times, to have a plan in place prior to the negative to allow them to take on the battle at hand. I preached that, and everything I talked about, I did. Yeah. My father would get on top of me about, if you don't own what you sell, then you're doing the wrong thing. You lose the battle to win the war. I remember right before my first son was born, my dad's like, did you do all your planning? Dad, I do everything I talk about. I always tell people our job is to be there when things are bad. Because you do your will. I'm like, well, Dad, I'm get beast mode, man. I just did the tough mudder the other. Did you do your power of attorney? Well, Dad, I didn't get it. So you don't do everything you say. I nodded my head. And over the next 2 weeks, I did it all. I was taking on more responsibility. I was about to be a father. So to go back to that point is after I'm giving the speech in front of all these people, preaching the same message over and over, and I am the shoemaker as kids have shoes, I got my 11th stroke. I felt the hot flash hit me. I turned my back on everybody so they couldn't see what was happening, and that was the moment I decided I'm going to the hospital right now. Got in a car. People are coming up to me, Matt, I got a question for you. A great presentation. I'm thinking to myself, if someone doesn't get away from me, someone's getting put on the ground with my hand right now. Aaron, that's not me. I don't do that. People walked me to my car. One more question. It's great. I peeled out of the parking lot. That's not me. I don't do that. I called my wife, who was shopping at the King of Prussia Mall, taking a little break from chemotherapy with Larry. His roller coaster kept going. I told her what was going on, and I met her at a place called Capitol Health in Hopewell, New Jersey. It was May 14th, 2013. I had a 90-minute ride. This is going through my mind. All right, this is cool. They're going to give me some medicine. They'll get this taken care of. Maybe I'm going to die. I don't know what's going to happen. So we get down there.
So I want to stop you there for 1 second. I just have a question. When you were on the road to the hospital from that last experience, you said you had about 11 strokes at that point, and you were
what I perceived were strokes.
What you perceived were strokes, and you were on your way to the hospital. What was going through your mind? Did you think, this is really serious? Did you think that you were going to die? Did you think that everything was going to be all right? What was your mentality on that 90-minute drive to the hospital?
I didn't really know. I was thinking everything. This is going to be no big deal. Like I was saying, they'll give me some medicine. Maybe I'm going to die. I don't know. It was like I kept going all these different directions because I didn't know what the deal was. And I'm more of a analytical type of person of A plus B equals C. And I just didn't know. So when I got to the hospital, I met my wife in the parking lot. We held hands. We walked in and told me, give me a CAT scan. I'm like, that's cool. It's like an x-ray. No big deal. So they give me a CAT scan. And 3 hours later, they come walking in. And they said, Mr. Newman, we know the problem. I'm like, yeah, let's diagnose it, fix it. Let's move on. Okay. You have a lesion on the left frontal lobe of your brain. Now, to me, a lesion is a cut or a bruise. And I'm
no big deal. I'm fine. Just patch it up.
I'll tell you what I thought. I thought I banged my head in the car accident. I must have dinged my head. And so what's interesting is there's a term that we don't utilize in whatever craft we're in. And that's a term called vernacular. And my point is this. Most of us speak the language of our career. We don't speak normal ways to people. We don't give them perspective in a way that makes sense to them. We speak in a language like our mechanics talk to us when we're nodding our head going, I have no idea what you're talking about. How much does it cost and when do I pick it up? They said lesion to me. So I'm thinking, freaking car accident, man. Okay, well, that makes sense. I probably did this and don't remember it. He said it's causing massive pain. I'm like, dude, you don't know half of it. It's causing you to lose ability to sleep. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, Mr. Newman, you're not getting strokes. You're having seizures in your speech and memory. And as difficult as that sounds to digest, I was actually like, yes, that's it. Okay, what do we do next? We got to give you an MRI, an MRA, all this other stuff. So they're bringing me in and out of the tube for the next 7-8 hours. And at 3 a.m, they tell me I got to get one more because they have to use something called contrast that they're going to pump into me. So my wife says to me, I'm going to go home. I'm going to make lunch for our 3 kids who are under 5. I'm going to get a ride from my dad for chemotherapy. And I'll be back in an hour. I'm going to be in the tube for an hour anyway. Don't worry about it. And the nurse comes in with a wheelchair. Goes, all right, Mr. Newman, one more MRA. And there's been a lot of them. I go, I'll walk on this one. I really don't need to get in the wheelchair again. She goes, Mr. Newman, it's a liability in a hospital. You cannot walk down to any of these tests. Great. So I get in the wheelchair. She grabs the clipboard behind me. All right, Mr. Newman, MRI. We need to see how big your brain tumor is. I go, it's a lesion. And that was the moment at 39 I was diagnosed with brain cancer.
Wow. So what were you thinking in that moment? Because no doctor had told you that you had a tumor yet. You thought it was a lesion. So how did you react?
So they brought me into the MRI tube. I was in it for about an hour and a half. And my head was going all over the place. They took me out of the MRI tube. They bring me into a bed. They plug me into about 30 machines. And they all leave. I started crying. I started a retrospective on my life. I started to think about my children. 3 kids under 5 years old. And I started to think there must be something I did that caused this to happen. I'm a good father. I'm a good husband. And strength is not how big your arms are. Strength is not how much you bench press. Strength is something that's located deep down in our bellies. And to say it again, at the deepest and darkest of times, we could find it, we could grab it, and we could own it. I saw it, I took it, and it was mine. I didn't know I had it in me. And I started just cursing my brains out. And the nurses to this day who tell this story, they come running in. They go, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I said, "I'm fine." That was my pity party. If I'm going down swinging, but I'm giving it everything I got. I didn't know I had that strength. And I started to see people differently, what real strength comes from. Strength comes from something inside of us that people find it. And when they take that, they have this nuance of losing fear and taking on what's in front of them. And it changed my perspective immediately. I was gifted with this new set of lenses. I started to have a better understanding on the fragility of life that I didn't understand prior. We talked about being Teflon before. And I started to just think there's no way I'm going to lose on this. What's next?
Yeah, no, that's incredible stuff. And, it puts you in that mentality of uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen next. And the way that we react to that, I think, really defines us.
I think cancer can take us spiritually or physically. It can never take us spiritually. We actually own our legacy. If we allow our legacy to be defined by the challenge we take on, that's on us. That would have been on me. This was my journey. Cancer is just along for the ride. And I remember my wife walking in that morning, maybe an hour later, with the doctor, wiping her eyes. Her husband's got brain cancer, which to most people is going to die. Her dad's got pancreatic cancer at some point soon. He's probably going to die. Got 3 kids. And the surgeon looks at me and goes, "We're going to do a full craniotomy on you. We're going to cut half your head off. We're going to pull the tumor out. We won't know the severity of it for 10 days. And we'll have to move your jaw. And then we'll stitch it back up. You'll be here a while." I said, "Let me tell you what you're going to do. You're going to get this crap out of my head and I'm going to take care of the rest. I ain't going anywhere." And he brought me a study by the American Medical Association to read. And what that study talked about is something called the downward spiral. And what's interesting is we all hear the story of the couple that's married for 50 years. The wife is healthy as a horse, husband gets cancer and he dies. What do we often hear happens 6 months later? The wife dies.
Yeah.
When you fall into that downward spiral of regret, resentment, negativity, the odds of getting out of it are extremely unlikely, which is why attitude is so important. And again, there's some diseases, there's nothing we can do, but we will be remembered for the way that we took on that battle, took on that journey, and the path that we were placed on. And all this guy did was pour kerosene on a fire. And I remember my wife looking at me. And I'll give you the point why I'm telling you this. I remember my wife looking at me going, "Our parents are going to be here in about 25 minutes. Her dad wasn't my father-in-law. He was my cancer partner. He showed me how to act. He showed me how to fight. He showed me the way to behave. He showed me what a warrior really does." And it all of a sudden made sense to me. I stopped believing in irony at that given moment. But I said to her, "Give me the iPad for a minute." She goes, "Yeah, do you want to watch a movie? They'll be here soon." I go, "Just give me the iPad." Aaron, that was the moment I needed. And I had to make a point to make sure all my things were in place because I didn't know where this was going to go. The first thing I pulled up on my iPad was my will. Box checked. Reality is I had a 3rd child at that point. Her name is Lola, my daughter. She wasn't in the will. But for those of us that truly understand financial planning, she did not have to be. Everything would siphon down through my wife and she could be added later. Next thing I did is I pulled up my power of attorney. There's a good chance when you're getting surgery where speech and memory are connected that you could become incapacitated, not be able to talk, have all these issues. Everything was done. I pulled up my investments. I pulled up my life insurance. I pulled up my mortgages. I pulled up everything. And that was the moment I laid in the bed and went, "Oh my God, every speech I've ever given in my career was about me." And a couple minutes later, my parents come walking in. And my dad gave me that same look he gave me at Delaware. "Hey, bud, how you doing?" But I saw it in his eyes. I saw the fear. I saw the evil. I saw the anger. I saw the scaredness of what was about to happen. I said, "Dad, come on, sit down on the bed with me for a minute." So my father comes and sits on the bed. My mom's fighting her tears in the corner. And I pulled out the iPad. And I started showing him everything. And when I finished, I took that iPad. I threw it on the bed. I said, "Dad, there's only one thing on my mind." He goes, "What?" I go, "Getting better. I have everything in place. I got nothing to worry about. I'm going to fight like a son of a bitch because I ain't going anywhere and I'm going to be here for my family. Nothing could take me away." And for the first time in my life, I saw my dad break down and cry. And I didn't.
That's incredible.
And my dad looks at me and goes, "You're going to beat this." I go, "Oh, I know I am. And he goes, these are the stories you're going to share. This is the way you're going to connect with people. What you're going to show them, this is the job of the advisor, to have this plan in place so you could take on the challenge when you need to and not be filled with all this other stuff. I said, Dad, not even on my mind. I'm swinging. And that was the moment that I realized I was the shoemaker as kids had shoes. And when you practice everything you preach, you show true belief, true integrity, honesty. And unfortunately, in a variety of different occupations in our lives, we don't see that. We people saying doing one thing and then acting in a completely different way. And I am 100% certain that gave me that extra boost of juice that I needed to say, I define myself. I'm not going to be sitting here, woe is me in any way whatsoever.
That's so powerful. I mean, that's the perspective, the attitude, the positivity that you had to have had in that situation. I mean, that's incredible, but that's honestly probably one of the reasons why you were able to overcome it, because people don't understand that, you know, if you have that negative attitude, if you have a bad perspective and you're looking at it in a negative light, then your chances become smaller. But if you look at it and say, you know what, I can get out of this, have a positive attitude, have the right perspective, understand that this happened for a reason, I can get out of this, then your chances explode and become a lot greater.
Well, think of it from a slightly different perspective. Talk about legacy as we talked about defining yourself. Think of the burden you can leave on others. How will you truly be remembered? If all of a sudden you're the person who they have to sell their home, they have to make changes of where their kids go to school, all of a sudden they have these financial issues where they don't know where this is, they don't know where that is, they can't find it. All of a sudden it's taking someone who's trying to grieve, trying to deal with something and putting all this responsibility on them. When you can alleviate that, you're really defining who you are and how important your family actually was. And like we said, this isn't about the investment component. This is about planning. And the fact that we don't educate students on this is how to pick their employee benefits, what a 401k is. You want real planning? Go to a great financial advisor. Go to someone who's going to take the emotion out of it and put it in the right positioning. But to not have this type of planning done, you're not only going to hurt your family financially, you're going to hurt the legacy that you leave to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so crucial to have that plan in place, to understand that, to make sure that, you know, you leave that legacy. And it's, you know, I love hearing that within your story.
You know, if you really dig deep into a lot of this too, it's the new set of lenses, as I mentioned earlier, that we're gifted with, where once you realize how fragile life could be, how lucky we are to have certain things, you get this new perspective in life that you try to pass on to others and you try to keep to yourself as well too. What I noticed is that a lot of people, when they get that new understanding, they don't have long enough to really appreciate it. And that's why, to give people the premise of how much they should love their children, how much the time they should spend. And I understand we worry about tomorrow, and a lot of us focus on yesterday. But I learned immediately how important it was to live in the moment and appreciate the now. And that's a gift that I was taking from cancer.
And that's so crucial. That's so crucial, because too many people either, you know, live in the past and regret and think about the things they could have done, or they live in the future and they aim, you know, I need to do this in the next year, or the next 5 years, whatever it is. And no one really thinks about it and lives in the present, lives in the now, and enjoys life, enjoys the experiences that they have. And that's such an important lesson to express to others.
It is, because we often don't realize that until it's too late. One of the things I started to do as I went through this, I was told I had a grade 3 astrocytoma. It was extremely aggressive. I'd have to go for tests the rest of my life, and there's a good chance they would probably grow back. I didn't look at it that way. I looked about spending time with my family, spending time with my kids, being a better person. And I was happy with who I was before that, but I was going to use the lessons I could take from this situation to make everything in my life better. And so what I started to do, for all this optimism, I would send out these emails and messages to friends and family on my new perspective, the gift that I was given. I went through surgery. Yeah, chemo, radiation, all this other stuff. But what most people didn't realize is the reason I started writing is I mentioned something at the beginning, that we learn these great lessons when we're young, and our parents' occupations plant these seeds in us, and they may not come out till later. I told you my mom was a teacher. I started to write to alleviate the negativity, the fear, the anxiety that I was pushing down into my belly. for all that optimism that I had, for all that perspective, the gifts that I was given on this new vision of life, you're gonna listen, there's a fear factor that comes along with it. And I would push them down, and writing became my outlet. It became my catharsis. And if you don't find an outlet for that stuff, you're gonna combust at some point. So I started writing for me. It made me feel better. I would send emails, like I said, out to friends and family, and it was like vomit. I would get it out of my system and boom, here you go. Every time I wrote, something triggered it. I never sat down. I never had a plan. I was like, oh, I feel better. I got that out. And every time I wrote something, I would get, could you put this person on? Could you put that person on? Could you put this person on? I never thought about it.
So important.
Well,
such a great lesson.
4 years into it, we had 20,000 people that were following these messages. And here's what I realized. Cancer is like buying a car. You buy a car, you leave the lot, you go, oh my God, I see this car everywhere. It's all over. No, car was always there. You just never noticed it until you had a direct connection with it.
Yep.
That's what I learned about cancer. It affects every family in some way or another. And I made a mistake there. I said, that's what I learned about cancer. That's what I learned about life. I don't care if it's depression, suicide. People want to know that other people are on the path that they're on. And that's how you inspire them. You don't inspire them with a bunch of shtick and canned speeches. You inspire them with a realness that breeds trust and honesty and thankfulness, and knowing that if others can take on that, I can too. But I was doing this for me. So 4 years into it, I decided to write a book. For myself, I needed some way to keep writing, to keep my positive attitude, to never give back the gifts that I'm taking from cancer. So I wrote a book, and I remember on March 23rd, 2018, I called my mom up. I go, hey, Ma, book's coming out tonight. I'm going to tell you word for word exactly what she said to me. She goes, you know no one's ever going to buy it, right? I go, oh, God, no. What are you kidding? Who cares about me? I'm some jerk off. She goes, but you're going to put 3 copies in your safe. And when your kids are old enough, they'll be able to read the real story of what actually happened. I said, Mom, I couldn't agree more. And 1 week later, we were #1 on Amazon in 4 different categories, and my jaw hit the ground. There was no marketing. There was no ghostwriter. There was no business plan. I wrote it for me, but it gave clarity to what people are looking for.
Yeah.
Looking for something to allow them to know there's others going through things. And all of a sudden I get called by ESPN. I was on that. I started to do TED Talks. And you realize my new catharsis came from talking about it. You still need to get that outlet out. But the connection you build and where people make the mistake, whether it's in business, family, is when you really hit the heartstrings by building deep-rooted connections with people and opening yourselves up and sharing things and finding the realness out about people. You build moats around them in a way that is very difficult to explain verbally.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And that's why the connection piece, the sharing, the personal information, whether it's in a speech, in a book, whatever it is so important, because it really builds that connection, that relationship with others. And it makes people really understand what your story is or what you've gone through, because they likely either themselves or know someone in their family or a friend that has gone through a similar struggle.
They have, but I also think it takes it to a little bit of a different level. I think it takes it from the perspective that many people have faced challenges. And this is what I started to learn as I started to get messages from people all over the world. I had no expectation this was ever going to happen. We become all this crazy stuff's going on. It made me feel better to talk about it. It made me feel better to write about it. I did it for me. I can honestly tell you that. What I really started to understand is that most people, they don't want to talk about it with anybody who hasn't been through something similar. Their catharsis was that I could talk to you because we're both on a similar plane here. I would get messages from people. I'd give a speech and someone would come up after me, regardless where I am, and they would tell me something, and they'd be with a friend or family member who was giving them a look like, oh my God, I had no idea about that. I started to get it, that people are looking for that person that they could put their trust in because you get it. You've been through something like this. And I always quote Spider-Man or Voltaire. It's however you want to take it. With great power comes great responsibility. There's no power to this. It's letting people know that I'll listen. I'll talk. I'll let you vent, do whatever you want. And I never expected it to get to the situation it's in now. And you see what really drives people is someone they know they can trust something in because they get it.
I love that. That's, it's an incredible story, an incredible kind of legacy you've been able to build and create for yourself. And it's just an awesome journey that you've been on. If you were to kind of leave one lesson to our listeners or to yourself when you were younger, going through all this, what would that be?
I'm going to end you with a small little story, if you don't mind. So
Yeah,
when I went through all this stuff, and I'm leaving a lot of stuff out. So if you read the book, you'll really see a lot of the open perspective change. But I remember I get out of the hospital, and 10 days later, I would know the severity of this and how bad it was going to be, or, hey, it's not that big a deal. The actual, of the tumor. So day 5, I've got a second head. I look awful. And my son is having his 5-year-old father's picnic at school that day at Pennington Montessori School in New Jersey. And my wife says, "You look a mess. You don't have to go to this." I said, "I will never miss this in the world. I see life differently. It's about appreciating the moment, living in the now. I would never miss this with Luke." So that morning, we take my 3 kids, Luke, Jake, and Lola, 2, 3, and 5, to school together. I'm riding shotgun. I can't drive. I'm a mess. We take them to school, and my wife takes the 2 boys to their class. And I take my 2.5-year-old daughter, Lola, and I'm holding her hand. And we walk to her classroom. She takes her little pink jacket. She puts it on the hook. She looks at me and goes, "Thank you for taking me to class, Daddy. I love you." And I started to well up. And I thought to myself, why don't I do this more? What? If I was normally doing this prior as a very successful business person, I had a phone in one hand, a BlackBerry in the other hand, go to class, Lola. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my moment. It was about her. And I was giving lessons that it was okay to not focus on the person who was it about. And I had this new clarity. I had this new understanding. And I remember going back and telling Larry about this, who's still fighting, going, this is a gift. And that day, at around 11:30, my wife goes, "You do not have to go to this Father's Day thing. You're looking bad." I go, "Never. I'll never miss it." So she has to drive me up to the school. My 5-year-old Luke's waiting at the door. He gives me a big hug. He goes, "I love you, Daddy. Thank you for coming." And I grabbed him. I gave him a big hug. And we're walking to the backyard to have the Father's Day lunch. It's 30 minutes, brown bag lunch. You sit with your child. And we walk back there, and I am rainbows and unicorns. I'm appreciating the second right now because I didn't know if I'd have this. And we get into the backyard, and I look up, and I see every dad sitting with their son. And I'm going to tell you what I saw. I saw every dad on their phone holding it like this, looking at it. And I went, "Oh, my God, that was me." I had no anger. I had no animosity. My phone was in my wife's car. And the lesson I would tell everybody is that remember, everything you're doing, somebody's watching. You're probably inspiring someone, but they're also taking lessons from you. And always remember, it's not always about you. It's about the lesson you're passing on to your loved ones. That will really define you.
Definitely. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Where can everyone find you kind of on social media, your book, everything about you online?
Yeah, so the easiest way to do it is my website is Matthew, MATTHEWS Newman, MatthewSNewman.com. The only person that calls me Matthew is my mother. But on MatthewSNewman.com, on there, you can go on there. You can contact us. You will see TED Talks. You will see interviews on ESPN. You will see countless amounts of stuff on there. It also has all of our social media on it. Books are on Amazon, on Goodreads, on Barnes & Noble, and it's called Starting at the Finish Line. But you can go on the website and it'll take you there as well too. You can contact us directly also if you want to share anything or if you want some type of communication or whatnot. But anything we can do to help out and help what I call our community of warriors, it's absolutely my pleasure and it's my obligation that I take unbelievably seriously.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it at all, if you got one thing out of it, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review. Thank you.